In 2025, the global order fractured. The United States, after 80 years of underwriting international security and trade networks, actively stepped away from the systems it built. We can track exactly how this happened by comparing the events following January 2025 with an alternate timeline. We are looking at the consequences of a second Trump administration against a reality where traditional, multilateral American leadership continued uninterrupted. This is a comparison of outcomes, not abstract political theory. We are looking past the treaty withdrawals and the press conferences to map the direct chain of cause and effect. When a superpower changes direction, the cost is counted on the ground. We measure the distance between these two timelines in empty hospital waiting rooms, soldiers running out of ammunition, flooded coastal homes, and displaced human lives. In April 2025, the administration implemented the Liberation Day tariffs. They placed a 10% baseline tax on all global imports and a 145% penalty on goods from China. The market shock was immediate. The policy triggered stagflation, a paralyzing economic condition where inflation rises while economic growth simultaneously stalls. The Federal Reserve was trapped. They had to choose between raising interest rates to fight inflation, which risks a recession, or holding rates and letting prices climb. This chart contrasts the two economic realities. In the alternate timeline, multilateral trade pressure brought inflation down steadily. Mortgage rates settled at 5.8%, allowing the housing market to function normally. In the actual timeline, tariff-induced inflation drove mortgage rates up to a punishing 7.3%. We can see the human cost of that 7.3% rate in this clinical data from a medical practice in Ohio. Families locked out of affordable housing or burdened by high credit costs had to make cuts. In the actual timeline, the rate of patients skipping essential medical appointments due to cost spiked to 18%. In the alternate timeline, it was 6%. Macroeconomic warfare relies on sweeping top-line numbers, but the bill is paid by ordinary citizens forced to choose between keeping a roof over their heads and paying for a doctor's visit. By March 2025, the administration pushed a ceasefire proposal on Ukraine. The terms required freezing the conflict along existing battle lines, effectively ceding 20% of Ukrainian sovereign territory to Russian occupation to secure a quick exit. At the same time, the administration threatened to make NATO's Article 5 mutual defense guarantee conditional on financial targets. European capitals realized the American security umbrella was no longer a guarantee, but a negotiation. In the alternate timeline, the United States maintained consistent military aid and unambiguous alliance support. The war continued, but Ukrainian forces were able to slowly consolidate their front lines, and European security architecture held firm. Without that backing, the actual timeline saw Russian military intelligence aggressively probe Estonian airspace, knowing no American authorization to intercept would come. On the ground in Europe, Ukrainian soldiers faced critical ammunition shortages directly tied to the paused aid. Deterrence is a psychological phenomenon. It exists entirely in the mind of the adversary. When the political will of a superpower fractures, the shield protecting its allies instantly crumbles. In the Red Sea, the administration launched Operation Rough Rider against Houthi targets. Iran escalated in response, targeting a U.S. Navy destroyer and killing 2 American sailors. As Iranian forces began intercepting commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, oil spiked to $118 a barrel. The alternate timeline relied on back-channel diplomacy through Oman and Switzerland to establish clear red lines with Tehran. The strait remained open, and energy costs stayed manageable for families buying gas globally. In Gaza, the administration proposed having the United States fund reconstruction to build the Riviera of the Middle East. The catch was that the plan required relocating the entire Palestinian population to Egypt and Jordan. The proposal alienated every regional partner. The fragile hostage ceasefire completely collapsed. 1.9 million displaced people remained trapped in the rubble, stripped of any viable political horizon. Treating complex, generational geopolitical conflicts as real estate transactions removes all leverage. It replaces the difficult work of peace processes with a blueprint for mass displacement. Domestically, the Department of Government Efficiency, operating outside standard legal authority, fired approximately 200,000 federal workers via email. This gutted the FDA, stripped the CDC of its early warning epidemiologists, and stripped FEMA of its emergency logistics coordinators. Bureaucracy is often slow, but it provides the logistics network required to respond to national emergencies. A fully staffed federal government pre-positions supplies and coordinates rescue efforts long before a crisis hits. When Hurricane Helene hit the Gulf Coast as a Category 4 storm, the federal response fractured. Supplies were inadequate, and National Guard deployments were delayed because the key coordination officials in Washington had been fired months earlier. A state deliberately hollowed out from within cannot protect its citizens from external forces. Stripping government capacity turns natural hazards into unnatural disasters. The alternate timeline is not a utopia. The climate still warmed past the 1.5-degree threshold, and conflict still burned. The physics of the Earth and the friction between nations do not stop for any administration. But in that timeline, the direction of history was actively managed rather than abandoned. We are left with a permanent record of the choices made. You cannot reverse the climate years lost, the Ukrainian territory surrendered to occupation, or the Palestinian lives that ended. Democratic institutions and global alliances exist in the conditional tense. They only survive if they are actively maintained, funded, and defended by competent leadership. When that maintenance stops, the institutions collapse. Time runs in one direction, and decisions cannot be unmade. But history is still being written by people who do not yet know they are making it. The only question left is whether enough people will choose to change direction before it is too late.